All right, welcome back everyone to another Moving Forward Moment. Today I'm super grateful to have Ellisa here today, and she's going to share with us a little of her story. Welcome, and thank you so much, Ellisa, for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you here. So I always have everybody start off with sharing a little bit about their story. What's your story? What brings you here today?
Um, well, the story I want to share is about my turnaround after a devastating time in my life. And what happened is I'm a mom of two children, and my oldest, who was then 14, I thought his ankle was sprained, and it turned out he had an aggressive tumor in his ankle. And it's called Ewing's sarcoma. So within a matter of a couple of days, I went from a sprained ankle reality to a cancer diagnosis and urgent, need for treatment. So it was really shocking and difficult, and it was about a 3.5-year process of treatment where, due to complications we always ran into, we kind of ended up more literally living in the children's hospital for most of those 3.5 years. And also because of the nature of my son's illness, about 2 months into it, it required him to have a below-the-knee amputation, which for me as a mother was horrific. And breaking the news to the kids and then putting on a normal, having a new normal. Mm-hmm. So I have a daughter and a husband also, and it turned our lives upside down. During my son's fight with it, I was extremely anxious, hypervigilant. I was up late at night doing research on his disease. I was kind of micromanaging everything so he could have the best experience possible, just being his advocate. But I neglected myself tremendously, and sitting in the hospital, day after day, and eating in the cafeteria. And my son was getting he was already a tall, skinny teen. So a lot of weight loss for him real quickly, like from 125 to 95 pounds. Wow. So you want ice cream, you want pizza, you want bread, whatever you want. I mean, anything I could do to get calories in, I'd do that. And just, I think, with stress and everything I was feeling, I was finding myself being prescribed a lot of medication. I had pain issues myself, so I was on narcotic pain medication, antidepressants, anxiety medication, sleep medication. I mean, all kinds of stuff. And how I even managed to focus. Oh, I thought I shut that off. I'm sorry.
Kind of got a catchy little beat to it.
How I was able to focus in that fog. Maybe it was adrenaline or hypervigilance of some sort. So after the 3.5 years, my son passed away in our home on home hospice care. And he passed in the presence of myself and my husband and my daughter, who is now 14. And after that, my daughter really, she was extremely close with her brother, really since the day she was born. And she unleashed her rage at the universe at her safe target, which was me. So I found myself in a situation where my, 14-year-old was being very rejecting, dismissive, rude, just not nice. And she was very attached to her dad, and he could do no wrong. And I felt like I could understand my husband's position at the time because he lost his son. He's a very hands-on dad, a wonderful father. But he wouldn't say like, hey, don't speak to your mother that way. And I wasn't getting through to her. And I recognized he probably didn't want to make any wave, and because she was real fragile, and we were very focused on trying to support her mental health.
So it sounds like you were at a place where you had just actually physically lost your son. Now you're going through also the loss of your daughter in some way too, because she's not the person she was. And then it sounds like too also the almost the team aspect of the relationship on top of it, because your husband's in this position now where he's not wanting to rock the boat. He's not going to shift things up. He wants to be someone who can be there for her, but at the same time, you're feeling more ostracized and outcast than ever.
That's exactly right. And it was extremely difficult, and to complicate it even further, because I was neglecting my health and I was under so much stress. And I also was aware 2 years in advance that my son was going to pass, but we weren't talking about it. Mm-hmm. And my son didn't want to really know any details about anything. He was a brilliant mind computer nerdy guy, so he liked programming and video games, and he kind of his friends, his dogs, he stayed focused in that lane. And I'm sorry that I lost my train of thought. I did feel I kind of felt on the outs in my family, and also, as I think is a very common experience after the passing of somebody or especially a child, a lot of friends jump ship. Yep. And I certainly experienced that. And a lot of my girlfriends were mothers of my children's friends. So when my son passed, I did lose a number of girlfriends. And also I did feel emotionally like I lost both my children at the same time. And I really did not get to address much of my own processing of what we'd been through until I knew my daughter and I were going to be okay. And ultimately, go ahead.
What was the time frame, Ellisa, this was all happening? This was there's so much in it. I know your son from diagnosis to his passing, it sounded like it was about 3 years, right?
Yeah, he was 14 and he was just short of 18 years old at the time he passed.
And then you have all of this happening with your husband and your family, and now friends are jumping ship. How did you manage to, keep your head above water and not sink at this time? Because I think a lot of people, if they're going through something similar, they may very well not keep afloat. What did you do to do that?
Well, first I'm going to be honest and say I did not keep afloat in the beginning. And I also had to have 2 heart procedures. This really, and I was young, it really took a toll on me. And I thought it was poetic that the artery bringing blood to my heart would block off. I mean, but what I did, I would say this was probably 5 years after the passing. The first thing I did is, now I'm still trying to work out my relationship with my daughter. And maybe it was 4 years. She was around 18. We still hadn't really mended at that point. And one thing that was real painful, but it turned out to be a gift, that she used to say to me, "You neglected and abandoned me." And at first, it was like, there's nothing more painful you could say to me, because both those kids I put above my own life, and they were equally important. But I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Byron Katie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I decided I wanted to go do a healing thing, and I went to her 9-day school for the work, which was the beginning of my journey to heal. And I did a lot of worksheets on my relationship with my daughter. And I came home and working with the idea that I neglected and abandoned her. So I really, what happened is, afterwards, I came home and sat her down on the couch and told her I had an apology to make to her. And she got a little interested, so she sat, and I said, "I want to thank you for insisting all these years that I neglected and abandoned you, because I now see how that's true." And she was like, "Tell me more." And the way that I found in my heart that that was true was that I was very focused, and very focused on her brother. I was taking all this medication, and I really was going through the motions. I wasn't the same mom that I was before. And I wasn't emotionally present. And then that's a form of abandonment.
Yep.
And I said, very honestly, Emily, I have very few memories of you at 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. It was like a blur.
Yep.
And I really could feel that as a truth. And my daughter started sobbing, and she threw her arms around me.
Wow.
And it was the beginning of healing. It didn't happen overnight, but it was the beginning of healing, and I practiced the work.
That's absolutely beautiful. And I want to highlight that really quickly, because I want to make sure everybody else can replicate what you did. Because not everybody has to go to a 9-day workshop to take the wisdom that you took, which is so important. First of all, I want to acknowledge you for recognizing that and doing that, because most people do not do that. They would just carry that whatever emotion was, and they'll carry it with them indefinitely and choose that as their path. I was leading a workshop the other day with some other coaches, and I was talking to them, teaching them more about how I do what I do. And I had several people had basically a couple minutes to say what was going on, and then I was going to coach them and give them feedback and help them shift from where they are to where they want to be. And so I was doing these in really rapid fire ways to just show how effective processing can be. And the coaches all asked, they said, "How can you do that as fast as you do it?" And I said, here's the number one thing most people struggle with. When somebody else speaks, we are listening to them not with the intention to necessarily help, but with the intention to understand in our own language. So when we have a daughter that is saying, "You abandoned me," in our world, in our language, that concept doesn't even exist. And in fact, it's almost the exact opposite. We have our own ego, our own emotions that come up, and it's just basically, excuse my English, but how dare you, you ungrateful little, you know what? You have any idea what the F I've been through?
Right.
F too.
Absolutely.
Right? And and justifiably so too, right? You're going through absolute hell, and then she has the audacity to do that. But in her language, in her world, her whole life shifted too. And her mom, who was always one way from her from age 0 to 14, was all of a sudden a completely different way. Mm-hmm. At a time when she's going through this whole thing. And so reason I want to make sure I'm drawing attention to that is because each and every one of you who are out there, whether you're a parent doing this with your children, whether you are a spouse doing this with your significant other, whether you're a brother, sister, aunt, uncle, family, friend, whoever it is going through a process like this with someone, the worst thing you can do is listen in your own language. Because when somebody is going through something like this, we don't have a frame of reference, and it's basically like Charlie Brown speak, the wah, 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 wah. You need to listen from their world. And it's going to be one of the hardest things you will ever do. But if you can do it, it will transform your relationships, and it will put the healing process at a quantum leap speed. Is listen from a place of love. Not from a place of defensiveness, not from a place of ego, not from a place of who's right and who's wrong, not from a place of how dare you, you ungrateful, fill in the blank.
Right.
But just listen from a place of love. And to do that, you have to disregard anything and everything you think, feel, know, or believe is right or wrong, and just open your heart and try to, and not even try, but commit to allowing yourself to see life from that other person's eyes. Because if you were to step outside of yourself, and I don't just say you, but I say anybody listening to this, and put yourself in their shoes and look through their eyes, you'll allow yourself to start to see how they can think and feel. And when you allow yourself to start to see how they think and feel, this is where you can really have empathy, you can have compassion, you can create a sense of closeness, and you can really bring each other together and help heal. So that's absolutely beautiful. I'm so glad you shared that. Thank you.
Yeah. And the other thing we learned too is if you feel an arrow through your heart, but based on what somebody says to you, it's good to go inward and see, because that means it resonates in some way. Just maybe find how that is true. Because if they say something that it just doesn't resonate with you at all, or it doesn't hurt, it can kind of roll off. But those important things, yeah. The other thing is I needed to, this gets a little woo-woo, but I needed.
I'm down with woo-woo. I like woo-woo.
I love it. I needed to also pursue afterlife study, mediumship, and also moved on to serve the bereaved community myself. Those were important aspects of healing. Additionally, getting outside. I'm a big animal lover, but when you suffer a profound loss, horses for me are very healing. And the one thing that I, during my son's treatment and after, I would just notice that when I would go to the ranch where my horse is stabled, I wouldn't think about cancer at that time. It just, I would be the whole drive over. And then I would notice when I get in the car to leave, wow, for that hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, it was my only respite. Or if I did feel it, it wasn't so raw on the surface. It was more underneath. And I also like to do competition with dogs. So animals are very therapeutic for me. The woo-woo stuff is pursuing a certain type of mediumship. I needed to know, is dead, or is there more when you leave the physical body? And my confirming and being able to practice and know that there is more, and that I can continue to communicate with my son. And what I do, and this is going to sound very far out, what I've realized I am able to do through mentoring is record conversations, messages, as they don't obviously have their physical bodies or voice, but they can transform sounds in the environment into communication we can hear. Once I realized that, I wanted to shout it from the rooftops, and it was so healing to me that I can continue a relationship with my son in the realm where he now is. And so I started to share that with other bereaved parents, and then found also that with practice and ability, could now also bring through communication from others. So that is something I share, and the healing I experience and see in other bereaved people has been nothing short of, I can't even think of a descriptive word, how phenomenal it is. But the other thing, my finding that my relationship with my son isn't dead.
Yes.
That gave me also the ability to get off all this narcotic pain medication. I lost 60 pounds.
Wow.
And, I was initially reflecting on the outside how I felt inside, very heavy, very weighted down, very drugged up. And now I feel joy to live for me. Initially it's like I want to live because I have another child, I have a husband. It was more obligatory.
Yes.
And even with my heart issues, it was obligatory. But now I'm really excited to be alive. I enjoy, the simplest pleasurable things. And yes, I miss the physical. I don't know how exactly to get around that, but I would take, as much connection as I have. It reduces the amount of grief that you carry, because instead of being 100% cut off, maybe you're 50% cut off at your best. And having, being able to reduce those bereaved grief, excruciating feelings from 100 down to a 50 is a good way to move forward. And that's how I'm moving forward.
100%. And I find that the more we focus on connection, the more open to it we are, the more you'll see those feelings eliminate altogether. You'll still have those missing feelings for sure. I mean, I think that's going to be an inevitable part of life. But the thing is that they become feelings and they don't become things. One of the challenges with grief is grief transforms in our culture from an emotion to an identity. And it was never intended to be that. It's an emotion we feel. And when we get so stuck in it, I think it's tragic that we have this thing as dead, period, end of sentence. And when we focus in one of my courses I teach called Healing from Loss, a huge part of that course is built around the concept of teaching people how to really break through that barrier of its end of it. Because it's when we hold that belief that that's it, there's nothing more, we start to build this wall around us and shut out the outside world. But what it traps inside of us, it traps in all the grief, the angst, the sadness, the despair, the depression. And it doesn't allow for any sort of way in for communication. And it's when we're able to silence, like with your daughter, right? You were able to silence your own inner voice about what you decided it meant with her. You were able to form a new relationship. And when we're able to silence our own inner voices about what it means with losing someone, we're able to open our heart to listen to the quiet whispers that our loved ones are leaving out there all the time that we just never hear because we're too focused on our own suffering.
Yes.
This has been such a helpful conversation, and we're about out of time. So if you could leave everybody with just one piece of advice that you feel wherever they are in their journey would help them. You've covered on so many things, from really opening up and getting out of your own way and looking at what's most important, to the woo-woo, which I love talking about woo-woo too. If you had one piece of advice that you could use just to sum up with people that they could take away from this, what would that be?
I think not identifying, not like you said, not labeling yourself. And when you suffer a loss, whether it's a death, a divorce, whatever loss it might be, it's try to find, when you're ready, find one thing that feels good and build on it. And I highly recommend being in nature, being with animals, if you like animals, or if you enjoy painting, whatever it is, try to integrate something pleasurable, even if you're going through the motions in the beginning. It's like you have to retrain yourself
Yes.
to re-engage. And, you know, I understand isolation and depression, and I truly have lived through, you know, the rock bottom, you know, worst through coming out. But I would say that healing workshops that resonate with you are a good start. But I don't feed your grief.
Yes.
Don't nurture, feed it. There's so many bereaved groups where everyone just talks about how miserable they are and other people reinforce it. And 20 years later, they're still there. They're talking about the same stuff. And the mothers that I am acquainted with and that I work with, that I find who get on a more spiritual path, especially earlier on, seem to be the ones who are able to move forward the fastest. But if that isn't your thing, I guess I'm reverting back to nature or painting or something just to help get you out of your head.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful way to finish off on it, is not to feed your grief. You know, there's a saying that's long been around that we're the 5 people we're the average of the 5 we hang around with the most. And I always say, if we're committed one way or the other to being happy, sad, angry, depressed, grief-stricken, whatever it is, we'll find a way to do it. And it doesn't take much more than to surround yourself with people who are going to be on the same wavelength. You want to get on a wavelength of healing and moving forward, shift that. If you get around people who are going to be committed to feeling sad, miserable, depressed, and grief-stricken all the time, you're going to experience more of it. And I love that. Do not feed your grief. There's so much other things you could do: happiness, joy, love. Get out in nature and feed what nature has to serve, because nature serves some wonderful, wonderful, really wonderful things. So
it does for sure.
Yes. Ellisa, thank you so much for being here today. It has been an absolute pleasure to share this time with you. And I am so grateful for your journey and what's brought you here today. And I know that this is going to really be impactful for a lot of people. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you too.
You're very welcome. So I hope this has been of value to you all. Be sure to leave a comment, subscribe to it. And if you'd like to be considered for a future Moving Forwards moment, go ahead and shoot me an email or leave it in the comments below, and I'll reach out to you. Sending lots of love to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.